Amelia, I'm going to start with you. So if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I am Amelia Muldowney. I am employer brand specialist at Kier Group, which is a construction company that works quite closely with the government to build like hospitals, prisons, things like that, anything you can see really. And yeah, so that's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Harriet Maxted. I'm the employer brand lead at JLR, so Jaguar Land Rover. I have been in the employer brand industry about 4 years, and I've got experience agency side as well as client side.
And hi everyone, I'm McNeilly. I'm the Global Employer Brand and Attraction Lead over at Primark. Been with Primark a couple of years now, and before that worked on the agency side with clients like the Lego Group, Deloitte, PepsiCo on all things employer brand attraction and everything in between.
Amazing, thank you very much. And I think Kier was mentioned on one of the good slides of David's branding. So I was getting a bit nervous when I was thinking, oh, which side is he going to be on? So it was a good one. Amazing. So one of the questions that we've got, and something that I know you've all got in common as well, is you're somewhere on your journey on relaunching or launching your EVP and your employer brand. Do you want to just give people a little bit of a background as to where you're currently at, what the next steps are, and Marcus, I'm going to go this way round on this occasion. So where are you up to on your EVP journey?
Yeah, sure, no worries. So we're in a phase 2 of our employer brand. So a couple of years ago, we launched our first phase, focused on the talent value proposition for our stores, so the vast majority of our 80,000 colleagues. We then were working to develop our global employer brand to speak to all audiences. Had a bit of a curveball last year when the business decided to redo its purpose and values, which I'm sure we can all agree are pretty key ingredients to an employer brand as well as their master brand. So currently where we are is just finalising our employer brand look and feel with the pillars and getting ready to launch that in the autumn.
Yeah, so we are a little bit behind that. So we have just launched our new EVP, and we're kind of in the process of embedding that globally, also across all of our different recruitment partners and agencies as well. So taking a bit of time. We were having a conversation earlier. I think you kind of launch it with a group, you do some workshops, and then the tendency is to think that's it. But actually, that's the first step of a really long time to really engage people and make sure that they've fully understood it. And we haven't sort of got a physical employer brand yet, but that's sort of something that we're about to start soon.
Yeah, so you've probably got kind of like a broad spectrum. You've got all sorted, getting sorted, and nowhere near. We kind of play a bit fast and loose with our EVP. We don't have one that's kind of fully defined. I mean, I'd say our join the construction revolution is kind of broadly where we fit with it, but because we are trying to attract so many different people, so many different generations, so many different kind of industries and specialisms, we try and manipulate depending on what we're trying to do at the moment, with kind of an overarching theme of we're trying to make a change within the industry to make everyone feel more included.
But you've recently relaunched your career site as well, is that right?
Yes, so we did recently relaunch our career site and ATS platform as well. So that has kind of been replicated within that too, and thankfully it showed up on the good side. And yeah, so that's been really key, is making sure that it's not just hard hats and high vis, it's everyone and everything.
Yeah. Brilliant. So the panel is all around talent attraction for 2024. So I know it's slightly broader than employer branding, as if that wasn't broad enough, but hopefully it should cover lots of different sort of challenges and questions that you will have as well. So please do feel free to pop your questions on Slido. But a couple of the ones that we've got sort of coming up is, what have been some of the biggest changes within employer branding and talent attraction that you've seen in the last 6 to 12 months? Obviously, it's a very different market, and it's actually quite a volatile market for candidates at the moment. So what have you seen as some of the biggest changes that you've had to adapt to and adapt your employer brand over the last 6 to 12 months? I'm going to go to you, Harriet.
So I think for me, what I've really started to notice is the traction that's coming towards skills-based hiring. So I'm starting to see that across job boards, but I don't really think it's kind of permeated across to like companies' career sites yet. So that's something that I'm really going to be interested in following is, you know, what are people going to do on their career sites? Are they just going to bucket it by skills? Is it going to be the end of the job description? And then how is that going to sort of translate to social as well?
That's a big question, isn't it? Is at the end of JDs. I think we've had this discussion for the last sort of 2 or 3 employer branding conferences, and they're still there at the moment. But yeah, Marcus or Amelia, any other sort of points that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say, obviously with the ageing population and the ageing workforce, it's, I think now more than ever, trying to figure out how to target everybody, and especially for construction in particular, some of the fields that we hire for, you have to have made the decision to study or work in that field quite young. So although Generation Alpha aren't even in the workforce yet, we are still having to think about how we target them and make it interesting at this point. But then on the flip as well, potentially people who are not quite ready to retire but are looking towards maybe changing what they've done for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and how their skills are transferable within the industry to try something new as well. So yeah, that's been a big one.
Yeah, generational. I don't actually know what Gen Alpha is. So that's just after Gen Z. So what's the age?
I think
bracket?
They're about 13 right now.
Okay. I feel very old. Yeah. Excellent. Marcus, yourself.
I think internal mobility has skyrocketed up the agenda. I think we see from a lot of kind of candidate surveys, people really wanting to understand how they can build and grow at companies, and that really needing to be clear. And certainly from the engagement results at Primark, we know that our colleagues want it. And, you know, going back to your whole skills-based point, it's, you know, really understanding where the skills are in the business and how to map that to our future needs. We know it's tough to fight for talent at the minute. To your point, just getting people interested in certain industries is tough enough. So it's how do we really look internally as well and make sure that we're set up for success there.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that you were all facing was actually the sort of lack of recruitment budget as well, is also a big challenge. How has that impacted on some of the sort of employer branding or talent attraction campaigns that you've been sort of working on? Has it had a huge effect, or Primark, your global, I know the clothes are cheap and everything else, but does that mean that you have all the same sort of challenges around budget?
Yeah, definitely budget challenges. You know, we're a successful business. You know, we're growing. You know, we just launched in our 17th market, but we're also a cost-led business. So everything that we do needs to be really, really backed. And you know, my EVP budget got halved last year, which was, you know, really, really challenging when you're looking at what you need to deliver. So it's really about how do you box clever. So when we were doing all of our insights, okay, I can't get an agency in to help me run a load of focus groups. So what sources of information do we have available to us from the engagement survey, from Indeed reviews, what exists within the business and what can we do with it? And I'm a big believer, and I think Sam was talking about it earlier on this morning in terms of advocacy. I think actually, even if you do have a big budget, getting through, especially in the digital space these days, is really hard. It's a really crowded marketplace. We're not just competing for, you know, for people's attention to jobs. Do you want a holiday? Buy this product. Go here. Do this. Do that. So I think advocacy and getting cut through via peer networks, via your colleagues, I do think is the future. And I also think it's kind of probably a step beyond advocacy to say we should be working with colleagues like, you know, brands do with influencers, in so much so as they should be rewarded for adding this onto their day job. So I think, you know, that's a big thing that I'm exploring at the minute and starting to look at the strategy for that.
Yeah, interesting. Amazing. So we're going to move on to the next set question, and then we'll start going into the Slido questions as well. So looking ahead to 2024, we're obviously halfway through the year now. Where do you think talent attraction's going? Do you think there's going to be any real big changes, any real big impacts that's actually going to affect it? I know we have, surprisingly, I think it's only been mentioned once today. AI is obviously a big player. You know, how are you utilising that? But yeah, where do you think it might be going in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be brave enough to talk about AI just for a minute. Don't ask me too many questions. But AI is definitely overtaking, and it's kind of what we're focusing on is not necessarily how we are focusing on how we can use it, but also then how are we making sure that it's not negatively impacting our recruitment as well. So we've had candidates use software that can apply for a job, like I think we had 63 applications in a minute from one candidate. So it's making sure that we are future-proofing against those sorts of things as well, so that it doesn't mean our recruiters are then having to spend all this time flicking through these CVs that are completely irrelevant and can't actually focus on creating a good candidate experience for those that will work for us. So AI has been a funny one to figure out, okay, how can we make it for the best? And then how can we also protect ourselves from it as well?
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it? A big challenge. Harriet?
So I think for me, next 6 to 12 months, the focus is really going to be on delivering what people actually want, so the content that you want. So if I think about campaigns for maybe, say, like early careers coming up in September, instead of just giving perhaps more polished video, it's what questions do we tend to get asked each year, and what can we see that people are going to want, and can we deliver that to people in sort of bite-sized chunks that they can just go away and find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I completely agree with that, especially for the younger generations, bite-sized information. I mean, what, TikTok, you've got 15 seconds to make an impression, right? So how do you get those messages across in a really succinct way? And I think adding to that, we've really got to test ourselves on differentiation. I think, when we're building our EVP frameworks, we can run the risk of them kind of feeling like we're saying the same thing to other competitors. So we've really got to push ourselves to be like, what really truly makes us different. And we've also got to keep in mind like hygiene factors as well. Do you have a D&I strategy? What you're doing in the D&I space is a hygiene factor. It's expected. Flexible working, what are you doing there? It's a hygiene factor. It's expected. We've really got to think about what we're doing in this space has got to talk about it, but also what makes us truly different. So example at Primark is I can say with full confidence that working at Primark is really, really different to any other store. Why? Because our retail assistants, basically run their area of the store. They manage their own business with their team managers. They're responsible for ordering. We know that H&M don't do that. We know that Inditex don't do that. So it's really, really, truly understanding what those differences are.
Yeah, amazing. So we're going to move on to the Slido questions now. So thank you for giving those sort of bits of insight, and hopefully we'll get some good questions that I can see that we've had some good ones coming through. So we're going to start at the top, and obviously, as you all know by now, you can up-like them. So we'll work from the top down on this one. So you all work for pretty well-known businesses, which have had some negative press previously. How do you work with the business to ensure your employer brand remains strong during those times and that sort of reputation management sort of piece? Is there any sort of tips that you might be able to offer? And happy for anyone to take it.
Okay. So I think, obviously, don't want to teach everyone things that they already know, but employer brand is really about the people. So it's really about sort of focusing on the stories about the people that make up your company. So a bit like Marcus was saying, like what makes your company different, what makes your company great, it's the different people that work there and their collective efforts, I think. I think there's 2 points to that. It's the people and really sharing great sort of authentic people stories, but it's also having a good relationship with corporate comms, corporate brand, whatever you call them. And just being really collaborative. I think people sometimes hear the word employer brand and get a bit scared about that brand word, but really, like we all know, it's your reputation as employer. It's way more than just that scary brand word. So I think having that relationship with them to work together to make sure that the content is sort of working to drive the same cause is really key.
Yeah, Marcus, what are you gonna?
I guess not to use kind of bullshit bingo word, but be authentic. Fundamentally, we're in a world now where you can't control the conversation; you can only be part of it. So certain things are going to get said about your brand. All you can do is be part of the conversation and represent the other side of the story. So I know full well kind of some of the perceptions that might come with a brand like Primark, but I also know that we've got a phenomenal environmental sustainability and ethical trade team that work unbelievably hard with our markets to look at how we support the workers in our supplier factories. How do we be more circular? How do we be more sustainable? It's a journey. We're not there yet, but it's about getting that story out there in conjunction with corporate comms. I think is a really important thing. Everything that brand does, that corporate comms do, impacts employer brands. So you've really got to work together. And also, I think it's perfectly okay to say that you're on a journey. That, look, this is what we care about. This is what we're about. This is what we're trying to do together.
Yeah, and I think both David and Tom and Simon, it's like show, not don't tell, and also having that authentic piece. And I'm surprised authentic hasn't come up more throughout today. But yeah, absolutely. Amelia, did you have anything that you wanted to add on that side?
Maybe just we work very, very closely with our comms team. So anything that comes through is always flagged to us as well, and then vice versa. It just means that we can make sure that we don't put something out that actually contradicts maybe something else that has happened or is poorly timed and things like that. So,
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is always can be tougher to get that relationship going in any case. Amazing. So we'll move on to the next question. It's around diversity hiring, and we had a D&I conference just a couple of weeks ago, and we know that it's still hugely important. Despite lots of emphasis on diversity hiring over the last few years, we're all still talking about it and still making strides. How do we nail attraction in this space, and what have each of you done that's really worked? I know Kier's done some amazing stuff in different sort of diversity groups as well. So I don't know if you want to start us off, Amelia.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that whole show don't tell thing again. I think people have kind of cottoned on to the fact that, yes, diversity and inclusion is something you're targeted on. It's something you have to do. So if the messaging doesn't feel authentic, they will see right through it. So we just try to filter it in wherever we can without it feeling forced. And the words diversity and inclusion is something we are starting to try and move away from, and actually we're just trying to show like we've done this in this particular area because of this and stuff like that. So we're trying to move away from the obvious and more to the subtlety of it and just building it into everything that we do.
Yeah, and also I'll probably add for you on this one as well, as I know you've done quite a few attraction campaigns in sort of diverse groups. So refugees, I know Kier work with and have a great programme there. There's also the ex-offenders, which can be quite hard to get over the line, I think is safe to say. But yeah, some real sort of targeted campaigns on that side. But in terms of other sort of diversity attraction campaigns, have you worked on anything sort of specifically recently that's seen some good successes, Marcus or Harriet?
I think as a business, Primark are naturally diverse. We've got so many different nationalities from so many different backgrounds across our 17 countries. And I think if I'm being honest, we're probably still at the early start of our, call it, D&I talent agenda. But I think, to Amelia's point, it's making sure that you've got really good representation of the colleagues and the stories that you put out. But I think it's also, training the team. So we have a fantastic D&I team. They are more focused on products, so, things like our accessibility range, menopause range, etc. But they also do look at colleague training. And I think, we're talking about talent attraction, what we do externally, but I think it's also about what we do internally as well. So what training is available to support you if you were to be working with a neurodiverse candidate. We're exploring partnerships like with My G Work at the minute, again, to look at, what is that training that we could give our TA team to support them, making sure that we're removing unconscious bias, that kind of stuff. So that's what we're looking into at the minute.
Yeah. Harriet, anything to add?
I think I would just echo Amelia's point, to be honest, about it's not necessarily, it's about kind of just weaving it into everything you do and just keeping it front of mind.
Yeah, amazing. So on to the next question, and it's a really good one. And Harriet, I'm going to come to you first and foremost, because I know you've got it from a global level, and I know you've had to make a couple of changes. How do you make your employer brand reflect the reality in any location, office, store, agency, whoever it is that you work with? And I know you've had to do a couple of changes in how you approach things with this rollout, so I'll come to you.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I would say is we don't yet sort of have like a physical employer brand, but we do have our EVP that we're rolling out, and obviously we're all kind of working to make sure that there's consistencies, and yeah, we do have offices around the world globally across all different continents. And I think it's really just about like building the partnerships with those teams. So Elise, who works in our in social media, she does a really good job of like each country has a highlight on Instagram, so anything that happens, like you can make sure that like that's really visible, that sort of content. And then we try to really plan ahead in terms of like key things that are happening, and it's now just about like taking that next step. So I mentioned early careers earlier, that happens globally as well. So how can we all work together to, whilst there's different like deadlines and timings for different markets, but like how can we work together to make it consistent for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
Sure. I think you've got to build for differentiation from the start. So, if your EVP is the framework, it's your common truths, it's your key differentiators, making sure you've done your research. Does that stand up across the business? Hopefully, yes. But then when it comes to your employer brand, the wrapper, it's, as I say, creating it in a way that's going to be adaptable. So, with 17 different markets, our challenges in the UK or our knowledge of the brand is completely different to the US, where we're emerging, to Central and Eastern Europe, where we're emerging. So we've built the framework in such a way that we've kind of got these kind of key rules, if you will, but then it's really down to the markets to understand what's going on for them, what messages are going to resonate, how does that link back to our key sales, and be able to do it like that. I don't think you can have really rigid employer brands even more, and I think so we've done that. But equally, I think a couple of years back I was inspired by I Am IBM, because I thought that was just a great example of being a massive corporate global business, but finding a way that would make it meaningful for no matter where you are in the business.
Yeah, brilliant. So on to the next question. It's a really good one, actually. I like this one. So if you could warn organisations who are about to start their attraction strategies, what would you warn them about?
I think I would not necessarily warn, but advise that you look internally first for what they would have wanted to know or what they would have wanted to see. I think sometimes you can get quite bogged down in what your competitors are doing and to kind of align yourselves with that. But really, you need to be making sure that you're aligning with what your internal employees would have wanted to see from you, not what everyone else seems to think they would have wanted to.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's looking at your employees and asking them, why did you join? What made you join? What was it? And that's something that when we've been doing our EVP rollout, we've kind of said, okay, look which pillar sort of do you relate to the most, or which one was kind of the reason why you joined? And I think when you do look at something like an EVP, quite often people have an idea in mind of what they would like it to say. But actually, I think it's really important that you kind of leave those preconceptions at the door and you look at the research and say, this is actually what people think, or this is why they joined us. So these are our kind of key things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
I completely agree with all that. I think I started with a mission statement. What's the challenge and what are we trying to achieve? I think you've got to be really clear before you build anything in terms of what are your goals, what are your objectives, and how you're going to measure them. So, and I think that helps you set expectations with the business as well. I think we're still, as an industry, as employer brand professionals, we're still trying to influence and educate a lot of the business in terms of what does impact really look like. So I think you need to work to get all of that kind of agreed first and agree like, right, this is how we're going to measure success. This is how we know if we've won, because then, 6 months, 12 months down the line, and you're trying to show impact, if you haven't had that kind of pre-contracting and understanding and look back, it can be then quite hard to get people on board.
I'm just going to follow up on that one. I know it's not actually on the questions, but I know it was the top challenge that you all mentioned earlier on. How do you measure your employer brand in that case? Because that's something that the audience here said that they struggle with. So have you got a measurement that you always stick by, or does it depend on a different campaign? Happy to have any answers, all and every answer.
I look at it at two different levels, and there's the grey area in between, which I think is one of the biggest challenges in the industry at the minute. So at a macro level, what we have is an employer brand dashboard, and what we've got is a set of 5 to 6 KPIs at what I call each core stage of the kind of attraction funnel, if you will. So you've got awareness, inform or consideration, and then convert. So obviously generating awareness, what does that mean? How are we generating awareness? How are we engaging with key talent groups? You've got consideration. Okay, are we helping inform them? Are we helping them make a decision? And conversion, obviously that's the obvious one. You've got, are we creating applications? So under each one of those pillars, I've got global KPIs that we measure on a quarterly business to see if we're shifting the dial. But lots of things happen when you're a global business, right? And just for the pure fact of, we just had a load of retail jobs in a new market, that can skew the data. So that's where I think you look at the second level, which is the campaign level. And that's like, okay, what were our KPIs for this campaign? Clicks, applications, etc. So just talking with the panel a bit earlier on in terms of how much we value engagement rate and really understanding if what we're doing is resonating with our audience versus, I guess, what you could call vanity metrics, whether that be followers, whether that be reach impressions. It's like quality over quantity. And then the grey area, which I'll be really honest, I'm still trying to figure out, is all of that stuff that I've just talked about is based on kind of a linear journey to an end output. But we know that it can take tens, if not hundreds of touch points to get a candidate to apply. And even then, they're not an employee. They've still got to go through the entire, hiring process, the entire application process. So that's where I think we as an industry really need to look at how do we attribute, let's say, social media activity. And mine is all about awareness and consideration. So I'm not even trying to generate applications from it, but how do I show that causality to show that it took candidates down a funnel? And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, brilliant. Anything to add on those ones? That was really succinct, so it was nice.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it just before, so I think you covered it really well.
Amazing. Just on that one, so just going to move down to the second question. We'll come back to the first one. So how do you, obviously, Marcus, you mentioned that's how you use the data and what data you use to determine if your employer brand and TA strategies are working. What other data points is it that you guys use to ensure that they are working?
Yeah, we were saying as well that anecdotal stuff is really, really important too. I'm constantly pestering our recruiters to say, did anyone say anything about the career site? Did anyone say anything about our LinkedIn page or anything like that? And to get that through as well. And also anytime, like we try to get out and about and understand the business and visit our sites and stuff. Anytime we come across someone, we'll say, why do you like working here? Why have you stayed? Why did you join? Why did you leave the last person? And we just start building that kind of narrative in our heads as well. And then that's stuff that can either feed into how we move forward, maybe how we communicate our success as well as the data points. Because I think sometimes you can show the data points to senior leaders, and especially if they're not from marketing, branding, recruitment, they're like, okay, so what? What does that mean? What is that translating to in real life? And those real life stories add to it.
I would just add, in terms of data points, another thing we were talking about was looking at the career site. So I think that's something I look at monthly, and I just look at things like average time on pages, average engagement time, the users, the gender split, which you can get on Google Analytics as well. So a couple of things like that I do tend to just track as well.
Yeah. And do you guys use surveys as well for NPS scores and other sort of data points like that, or?
Yeah, definitely. We have a career site survey that we've just had to turn it off to make sure that with the new markets coming online that we're following local legislation. So that's been fun. But yeah, like being able to it's NPS to your point, but also engagement. Did you get the information that you needed? What were you looking for, etc. But I think just go back to Amelia's point, because I think it's a really good one. I think an employer brand, immersing yourself within the business and constantly having those conversations with colleagues is a constant validation. So if I've always got, I recite our pillars off by heart, but then when you just I won't give the colleague the pillars. I say, talk to me. How does it feel to working here? What are your challenges? What's going on for you? What does it feel like? It's that constant validation back that gives you, I think, that much richer insight. So just a really good point.
Excellent, thank you. So we have got a question around any brands that you love in the employer branding space right now. You can't say your own, just in case that's what you were about to do.
Obviously fourth in line of the three on stage. Innocent Smoothies has always been a favourite brand of mine. I think...
Is that a consumer or employer brand?
Employer brand.
Okay.
I think Innocent have really cracked the formula of integrating both really well. I think no matter whether you're reading a corporate LinkedIn post or it's about a job, it reads exactly the same and it feels exactly the same. And in their TV adverts, you can feel a sense of what it's like to work there and vice versa as well. So I think Innocent's been a really good one, whilst they can probably get away with being a bit more cheeky, which you can't always do in certain industries. I think still taking those lessons of how they've integrated the two so seamlessly is really good.
Marcus or Harriet, have you got any?
I was going to be cheeky and say Mars because I used to work there, so I'm quite invested in their employer brand. But I suppose another one which I just like to follow on LinkedIn as well is Gymshark. I think that they toe the line between their corporate brand and their employer brand really well, and it is just really authentically them.
Yeah, brilliant.
A common theme, but really like Spotify. And, you know, going back to your point, they've found a really great way of blending consumer and corporate brand together in a way that feels totally connected. Because you think about a candidate's experience, it's going to be partially brand, partially employer brand, corporate comms, and I just think the way that they present their EVP on their career site is just, you should just look at it and just, that's so them. And I just love that they've been able to achieve that. And thankfully, I've got the opportunity. I think we've all got an element of that opportunity with quite well-known brands. But, you know, if you're maybe in the professional services or finance, you might not necessarily have that same opportunity to be playful, to use certain consumer things. So I guess I'm just trying to think of some more, corporate brands. And, I think the big FMCG kind of brands do it really well as well, when they can't rely on their brands because that's not fundamentally who they are. Things like Unilever, P&G, I think they do really well when they're more corporate, have to be quite, a bit more serious, and they can't necessarily play on, Cadbury and stuff because that's not who they are, even if that's what the consumer knows them as.
So you've all mentioned the fact that some of your favourite employer brands actually toe the line really nicely between the sort of consumer and employer brand. Do you think that's where it's heading then? Because I know that a lot of companies struggle to find the balance, or whether they should be doing it, whether they're able to do it. Do you think the most successful brands that's where we should be looking? Is that something that could happen in the next 6 to 12 months or longer?
100%. I can't remember where this example came from, but someone worked with Virgin Media, and it was during a time where they'd had loads of outages. They were really kind of
they
negative.
Always
in
have
the
loads of outages.
Yeah.
There's no one from Virgin here, is
really
there?
negative in the press, and they noticed a massive decrease in applications. So you can't have them separate. They need to be completely aligned because one impacts the other massively.
I definitely agree, but I think probably brands like ours and like Virgin, because you've got a well-known consumer-facing brand, that is probably the future for some employer brands. I think if you're kind of, a legal firm, professional services and stuff, and you don't necessarily, or B2B, you don't necessarily have that well-known consumer brand, I do think you've probably got to come at it from a slightly different angle because you can't trade off that. But to your point, absolutely, I've not got our marketing team's budget, so you damn well you better believe that I'm going to try and piggyback off what they're doing. And if we're doing great campaigns, like if you think about D&I, you asked a question about that earlier, we are really well known for kind of our products and what we're doing in the D&I space, and that shows the passion of our colleagues behind it. So it's just like, right, great, I'm going to speak with all of those colleagues, what have they been doing, what do they care about, and that really helps us demonstrate the people side of it, the employer brand side of it.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think just based on what Amelia was saying, it's employer reputation at the end of the day. So if you have a bad experience with a company, then that's impacted your perception of them, and then therefore you might not be so inclined to go and work for them.
Yeah, I think we had someone presenting at a candidate experience conference, and they didn't say who it was, but it was a well-known retailer and that they were applying for a job for. They had a sort of 7-round interviews and they never heard anything back whatsoever, and they're just like, I'm never going to shop there again. So obviously the impact on that side. Might be the final question that we have time for before we sort of finish up. But with a building emphasis and traction on employer branding as an industry in itself, would you recommend a dedicated employer brand team in-house, or would you try to utilise TA/marketing with some outside support? I suppose the question is, where would you put, in an ideal world, where would you put employer branding in a organisation? At the top, I'm sure you're all going to say.
I think if you can have a dedicated team, then always best to have one. But I think at the end of the day, there's always more that you can do. So if there is just one of you, then you've really kind of just got to pick your battles and then utilise teams in TA and across marketing for sort of whatever you can. But there's always more you can do.
I think you can probably expect us to be biased on this. I do think the best thing to do is have an employer brand team that has a seat at the either HRLT or P&CLT table. The reason I think that is because true EVP, true employer brand spans the entirety of the business. And if you're going to do it right, of course it's talent because it's TA, it's talent development, but it's also internal communications, it's also reward and well-being. So I think in an ideal space, you'd have a team that can sit separate and work with all of those stakeholders to bring something together. Is that going to happen with budgets and understanding? Maybe not. So I think if that's not possible, I sit within TA, and I think that's probably the best place for the role to sit if it can't have its kind of own individual function. And I think the reason being is that we really have to get attraction right and get the right talent coming through. And you can always partner really effectively with the talent development teams, with internal comms teams. But I do think if you were sat in internal comms, or if you sat in any other area and you don't understand attraction, that really negatively impacts your employer brand and EVP activities. So try and get a team in its own if you can. If not, I do think TA is the place for it. I'm not sure if you agree, disagree.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I mean, I sit in TA as well, but there's a very hard dotted line into a lot of other teams as well. So yeah, it's just, you genuinely do need someone to be the advocate for employer brand. I think employer brand can definitely go under the radar a lot. It's, as someone said earlier, it's a vanity project. It feels like it's not adding any value, but actually, if we all left, things would go quite quickly, because it's just so overlooked. So having someone that truly gets talent attraction, truly gets employer brand to sit at that table and make those decisions as well is key.
Amazing. So we are nearly out of time. So I think probably just the final question that I would like to ask to each of our panelists is around your biggest tip for the audience here as well. So bring it back to sort of talent attraction for 2024. For those in the room, what would be your biggest piece of advice or your biggest tip? Go on, Amelia.
I think keep listening. I've kind of already said it before, but keep having those conversations with your employees. Companies change all the time. Feelings change all the time. So making sure you've still got a finger on that pulse is really key.
Mine would be, things are changing. You can't keep doing what you've always been doing. So find out where your audience are and sort of establish exactly what they want to know.
I think if it was with an employer brand lens, I think the biggest tip I can give is, at the start, become best mates or as good mates as you can. Really invest in the relationships with the wider stakeholders. So I'm not just talking about in talent, I'm talking about internal comms, I'm talking about corp comms, I'm talking about marketing. And let's face it, we're trying to get our foot in the door in these conversations. Is that, they're not coming to us. So it's developing a really strong relationship with those teams can make your lives a lot easier. I think from an attraction space, I agree with everything you've just said. I think, especially digital, just the environment is so busy. It's so hard to get cut through. Our budgets are probably not as much as they would have been a couple of years ago. It's how do we really use our people? And so, yeah, that's advocacy and influencers that I've just talked about. But also, I think we've got to really train our TA teams, our hiring managers, to understand employer brand, understand, how it positively benefits them, and get them to really be part of this. I believe that the future of recruitment is hiring managers. You're part of this process. You can't just give it to your TA BPs and recruiters to get on with. You're helping us attract, you're getting us into those networks. I think that's going to be really important in the years to come.
Amazing. What a great way to finish. So that is it for our panel. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not sure if that's just because I was sitting down this time. Normally I'm standing up, but I thought it was one of a really great panel. So thank you very much, and a big round of applause to our panelists.